Okay, so welcome to another seminar. So this is a Management 3.0 event, and Management 3.0 is a framework or a set of tools that gives managers, leaders, and basically all of us lots of very interesting tools to transform work and make people happy at work. And today we have Jason Little, the man behind Lean Change Management, and also a Management 3.0 facilitator. Welcome, Jason. Maybe you can start with short 2-3 sentences about yourself, Lean Change Management, Management 3.0, anything, and then we'll just do questions and answers, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
So I started my career as a developer and then got into project management and management. And my first experience in change was a large telecom that was about 10 years ago, wanted to transform to Agile. And I very quickly realized that Agile had really nothing to do with it. And it was all about change. So that got me started down this path. I became a Management 3.0 facilitator. Oh boy, it's got to be 6-ish years ago or so. I think we brought Jürgen here to Canada for the first time quite a while ago. And I've probably done, 25-ish Management 3.0 courses or so over the years.
Okay, thank you for that. So now, does anyone have a question immediately? Because if not, I have some, of course. Any questions? Okay, so I'll start, and I'll probably not be talking about Management 3.0 that much as that about Lean Change Management, which is something that I'm far more interested in. So just to give you a little bit of context, I work in a huge pharmaceuticals company, and we are now trying to do Agile like everyone is. However, it's very painful. The company is terribly old, and there is a lot of that middle management layer and everything that's kind of very, very resistant. And I bet you have some tips what to do with that, like how to overcome that resistance of people.
Yes. Is that where you want to start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, a nice meaty one. I don't know if you've heard the term the frozen middle before, but that's often what management is referred to. Is there's the people at the top that are asking for the change, there's the people on the bottom that actually have to do something, and it's the people in the middle that tend to have something to gain or something to lose. I tend to go more along the sides of, change resistance is just something that we as change agents see because we don't like the way it's going. And it seems to imply that these managers that they don't want to do it. They're not motivated, or they're actively resisting the change, or they're not bought in, or whatever it is. And for me, I've always taken more of a coaching approach with change. So it's be more behind the scenes and enlist those managers as the change agents. So transfer skill to them for, the organization's asking to be agile, but that's not really what they're asking for. There's a reason why they want to do it underneath. And that's where we have to kind of explore and figure out, well, what does that mean to the organization? What does that mean to the leadership group? What does that mean to the managers? What does that mean to the staff? The company I mentioned in the quick intro where they wanted to transform to Agile, there was more people in middle management than there were people on teams doing stuff. And I'm sure you've seen that in big companies too, right? It's very overloaded with sort of people around the work, managing the work. And, our team, the email from the product owner after our first release 8 months in said, this is the first time in the 10 years I've been here that we've released something defect-free. And when you think of that whole, well, the managers they're resisting the change, they don't want to do it. Well, imagine what it's like to be a QA manager where there's now a team that didn't have any official QA processes to follow, that was now getting touted as being the team that produced no defects. So imagine if you're in that situation, and how would you react to that? Where you've sort of, it's not been directly said, but it's sort of been, okay, well, if we can do this over here with this team, what the hell have you been doing the last 5 years? And why do we have so many defects in all of the other things? So it's immediately causing a threat to that QA manager. So what's the threat that's being caused to the other managers that is manifesting this symptom of resistance is sort of what I like to explore. It's pretty easy to just look on the outside and go, oh, well, they don't want to do agile or be agile the way that I see it as being true. Therefore, it must be them that's the problem. But there's a reason why they're acting the way they are, they're behaving the way they are. We need to unpack that and dig a little bit past that surface response.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. That actually makes a lot of sense, and that's something that we've been trying to do as well recently, not to force people into changing, but try to understand why they are working the way they are working now, and maybe then have a discussion with them. Well, this could actually help you, or maybe, because if it doesn't help them, wow, what is that?
It's my cat.
Oh, hello.
It's that time of day when it's had no attention and it says, "Excuse me, I would like some attention, please."
Okay.
So she'll sit here and fall asleep.
So yeah, that's basically the approach that we're now considering. Maybe a follow-up question on that, because you said you know there is usually that top layer that wants something and that very big frozen layer that doesn't want to do anything with it, and then the people down there who want to do something. What's your experience with the bottom-up change, where basically you have only the people down there who would like to change, in this case, who would like to be agile, but there is not that big of a support anywhere above them? Is something like that possible?
To a certain extent, yes. We tend to think that we need support from the top to make change work. And at Spark to Change, it's a conference that I run in Toronto every year. We had someone speak from a company called Key Hubs, and they do network analysis. They look at influence maps in organizations. They look at dynamics of how all the relationships work. And basically the conclusion was, it doesn't really matter if it's not supported from the top, but if they're opposed to it, they can kill it instantly. So it's not like we need the permission and support to do certain things at a team level, but if they don't like something, or if the team that's doing this ground up is disturbing something else in the organization, that's when what I call the Eye of Sauron kind of focuses on the team and destroys it. I think I've seen plenty of teams that get certain benefits at the team level. And of course, systems thinking and all the lean people will say, well, you can't just optimize the team, you have to optimize the whole thing. You can make things better at a team level. But for example, I've seen some teams where, well, we're agile now, so we're not doing these PMO status reports because that's just not agile, which is basically, you might as well just, give your organization the middle finger. It's going to give you the same type of effect, right? I'm expecting to get this artifact. I have not received this artifact. Why didn't I get it? So what happens? Well, first they go yell at the person who's supposed to give them the artifact. Then that person who's usually getting that artifact from somebody else says, why didn't you get this report from that team? Oh, well, they're working a different way. They're not doing it. Oh, well, they're not allowed to do that. So it's this sort of rumor mill, water cooler things that can destroy team efforts at the ground level. Odds are you're going to get somebody in the manager layer or above who's going to see a better outcome, and they will end up being a champion for it. So if it doesn't happen, it's just not going to happen. There's no change method or a way of forcing that stuff to happen. It's sort of, you have to disturb the organizational norms, and then if they like it better, they will want more of it. And if they don't, for whatever reason, it just won't go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much for that. So you're basically talking about small, like, nudges, or how would I say it, like that you try to nudge it a little bit or disturb it a little bit step by step, and sometimes it just sticks, sometimes it just falls back because nobody sees the value in that, right?
Yes, and they tend to forget about the victories too. I mean, a lot of the times, if I go to an organization and I see what they've done with agile or innovation or whatever this change is, it might not be where I think it could get to, but it usually is better. And the thing is, the people on the teams and management and the top executives, they're in it for the long haul, and typically coaches are in it for the short term. right? So, we want to see all of these benefits realized because we're there for a limited amount of time if we are, external. But teams, they kind of have the luxury of playing the wait and see approach. They can try a little small experiment, let it run for a few weeks or even a few months, and wait and see what happens. So they can sort of align what they're doing around the natural pace of change in the organization. But when us change folks come in, we tend to want to push more. And a lot of the change people that I've seen all over the world say, it's basically, you, as a change person, you can't wait and see because you have somebody that you're reporting to that wants to know what it is that you're doing. So a lot of the times we're kind of making work for ourselves. So we look like we're busy and we're doing stuff when a lot of the times we have to wait and see if this change will kind of take hold. And it's kind of backwards thinking from what's really out there in the change world from what I've seen.
Okay. Christian, any question from you?
Yeah, I was thinking before the webinar, which question, and it points me to what you said just before about when you ignite some changes in the team, and you have this wonderful example of the PMO report. How did you handle? Would you still fake it until they see the better outcome, or how would you handle such stuff? Because I have plenty of examples where I'm looking for a way to handle such a stuff. Like you have to do the PMO, you have to do X, Y, Z, and you don't want to.
Yep.
So how any tips on this?
I like to think of try to figure out what's a necessary evil that you sort of have to deal with right now because you're not prepared to open up that problem to the rest of the organization just yet. So, in the status report example, if the team decides at the team level, well, we want to start working iterative or agile or whatever it is, what is within our sphere of control that we can do? And what is it that we are going to do that might disturb the rest of the organization? And do we want to do that yet? So it might be, you know what, let's still do all of the enterprise, big company stuff so we don't draw attention to ourselves. Because we think that if we do that, it's actually going to make it worse for us. So part of it is knowing, like, what's the political environment in the organization? Who are the people that are, stand to gain and lose something if we work differently? And are we prepared to die on that hill? So choose your battles, more or less, right? Sometimes it's just not worth it to disturb the organization to that degree until you have some tangible evidence that what you're doing is better than the old way.
Okay.
I had a conversation with SVP once around that same type of thing. And we had gone to them with data for 8 teams that were trying this agile stuff and what had happened. And the first thing he said was, well, wait a minute, I only thought one team was allowed to do this. So he didn't even know that there were 7 other teams that were experimenting with a different way of work. And the first thing he wanted us to do was to stop them from doing it. And I was like, dude, this is your people telling you that the way you deliver stuff doesn't work. Instead of stopping them, you should be getting off your ass and going down to talk to them and find out what's really going on at the team level and how can you help them move this forward instead of trying to control it, because you're not going to control it. They're just going to comply to whatever your official process is, and then behind the scenes, they're going to do whatever they want. So it's sort of, for me, it was to provide safety for those teams to sort of disrupt that organizational norm, but the teams themselves, they were doing duplicated work. They were doing all the agile stuff and they were still doing all the old world kind of PMO stuff.
Yeah. And once you come to the point where you have the discussion with the management, one day or another they will notice it. Is there any trick, advice in the way to handle the conversation?
The understanding is always the place to start with. So, and then ultimately, if you want to say it this way, they own the system. So like it or not, they are the ones that have ownership and control over the processes and the systems and how work gets done and things like that. So ultimately it's their decision. So helping them through the decision-making process of how are we going to choose to work in this different way? What are we prepared to tolerate? How much control are we willing to give up to the teams? But somebody has to decide. That's, I'm very much on the sort of consensus collaborative side, but in the real world, it often doesn't work that way. Someone has to choose and decide, and you have to make trade-offs. There won't be an ideal state that, every team is going to be, a completely cross-functional, self-organized team. We're kind of weighing the pros and cons and dealing with an acceptable risk. So I like to kind of, especially if I detect that there's a lot of baggage with the word agile, and often there is nowadays because it's been around for so long. 10 years ago, it meant something. Now it's, there's so much out there that people have either a really good reaction or a really bad reaction to the word. So if I know it's kind of a bad reaction, I won't use the term. I'll talk about, boring stuff like, well, how are we going to manage risk in our projects? And how are we going to do this? And how are we going to do that? But sort of ease into it a different way. So you have to kind of understand the vibe of that team and know where the allies are. Who are the influencers? Because they're not going to listen to me as the outsider. They're going to listen to their peers. So who are the peers that support this new way of working? And what can I do as the external to sort of enable those people?
And do you use any advertising trick during the change process just to prepare the conversation with management?
One of them, if I can share my screen, I'll share this picture. This was a team that wanted to, they wanted to make this program agile, let's just call it that. And we had 24 people in the room. And my whole thing is around provoking the right conversations. So, in the traditional change world, there's the idea of the change readiness assessment. So make sure people are ready for the change before you actually do something. But we did that in a more visual way. And I had all the people in the room, if you ignore the black marker on here, on the left side here, or the y-axis, that was how interested they were in this agile stuff. And on the x-axis, or across the bottom, is how much time do they think they can spend on learning and experimenting with this new way of working. So there were managers in the room, executives in the room, and a few team members. And in order to get rid of the bias, I asked them to draw this chart on a sticky note and mark a little X where you would put yourself. So it was like a secret ballot. So I put that up on the wall and then reflected back to them that said, what is this telling you? Look at all the sticky notes that, this dude up here in the top left is very interested, but doesn't think that there's any time to do this because of the delivery time frame. But most of the people, they're quite interested and they think they could spend lots of time doing it. So now, what is it that we're going to do? So it seems like we're kind of aligned that we want to do this and we think we can spend the time on it. Now, what does that mean to our organization? What does that mean to us as the delivery team? So for me, it's always sort of figuring out a way to provoke that right conversation, but there has to be a cross section of people in the room. There's got to be, the change sponsors, the managers, the directors, staff, anybody who's directly affected and has to do something different needs to be involved in this conversation. Now, that's often a hard sell, but that's sort of where I put the stake in the ground and say, if you want to do this, these are the 3 conditions, or I can't help you because I don't know how.
Yeah, that's cool. I like the exercise and having each one doing his vote for himself before to stick. It's like catching the attention and making a clear picture.
I don't have a picture of another one, but I did this with another team, and all their stickies were right in the middle. And for me, it meant no one cared at all. So I just said, well, if I look at this and everybody's medium interest and medium time, which means no one's really thinking about it, so I don't think we should do anything with this change right now. And I would say most of them agreed. And I said, okay, cool. When you guys feel like you're ready, call me back. And that was it. We just didn't do it. And I think we get too stuck on thinking we have to make the change work when people just aren't ready for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's a cool picturization of the state the team and the management is in.
Mm-hmm.
And asking the question, is it worse, or do anybody want to change something, or do they want the static quo?
In larger organizations, I've used information graphs. If you've ever seen those infographics, where I would basically do the same thing. I don't know if it's a thing or not. I tend to call it perspective mapping, but basically I look at the executive layer, the management layer, which could be, managers, directors, and then the staff layer, and then ask them a bunch of questions and look at where we're similar and where we're different. So if I can find one in here. I know I've got one in here somewhere. But while I dig for that one, if you want to ask a follow-up question or something else.
Any questions from you? So anyway, so while you're digging,
yeah.
A slightly not follow-up question, a slightly different question. You mentioned experiments, that it's based on experiments, and I've been always a huge proponent of the scientific method, that you devise, that you come up with a hypothesis, that you devise an experiment, then you run it and then evaluate it. However, people seem to be very reluctant in experimenting. So how do you actually nudge people a little bit to be more willing to experiment? And I understand that you can do a whole lot of things in the environment, but what would be like some key things that you would say as a start would be good?
I had one person who came to a workshop who said they kind of follow the idea behind experiments, but they don't call them that because one of the stakeholders has bad word association to the word experiment. So when we experiment, things explode. So they kind of did them anyway, but they just didn't call them that, which is pretty interesting. So for me, again, it's knowing your audience. That word now has a lot of baggage, like lean startup, and brought in a lot of the ideas around experimentation, and it has baggage too. So yeah, experimenting shouldn't be an excuse for not doing any planning. You know what I mean? And often, let's just do something without thinking about it. So for me, it's in the early days of experimentation, that was okay. But now I think we can be a little more deliberate with how we approach it. So avoid the terms if people are kind of reacting to it in a bad way. But still talk to people the same way. Well, I think if we did this activity, or I think if we tried this process, I think this is the outcome that we would get. And here's what I think we would see after a month. Mm-hmm. And here's some measurements that, we could go around and ask the team in a retrospective, does it feel better working this way? So you can sort of frame the changes the same type of way, but just lose the word if people don't have good association to the word experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Thank you for that. That's definitely one of the things. And I had a very similar situation when somebody was allergic to the word like experiment. Oh my God, we cannot do that. However, I found one additional thing that especially now at this pharmaceuticals company, and that is that people don't want to experiment because they have this fear of failure, right? Oh, but it can fail. Oh no, we cannot do that. So is there something that can ease this fear of failure?
Depends what's behind it. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen someone get fired for experimenting with something and having it not work. I worked with one large organization where the director of HR, we were doing a couple of HR projects, and this person was responsible for payroll. So he said, well, we can't run payroll in an agile way. We can't do it like that. And for me, I was like, well, why not? What's the difference? And it basically came down to that it's better for him to screw up payroll for 80,000 people by doing it the old way than to try anything different. So it's not that it couldn't work. It's just his risk tolerance was not strong enough to try anything different. So it became a big safety problem for him. And something like for me in that situation, that was a non-starter. There was no point in trying to experiment or try to pick away at that problem. It was, you don't want to be the guy that wrecked payroll for 80,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So, how severe is that fear, right? Some people are a little more oversensitive than others. So is it a strong fear to be fired? Is it just looking silly? One VP in a large bank I was talking to said, the banking industry in Canada is fairly small. So if you get labeled as the executive that can't deliver, you won't get a job in the city again. So there's more to it than just what's going on inside the organization too. I usually, if you guys ever heard the term get out of jail free from the game Monopoly, there's this little get out of jail free card that you can get. So if you end up in the little jail, you don't have to pay or roll the dice. I do that with every client. So well, you have a get out of jail free card. It's basically me. Everybody knows, everybody blames the consultants anyway. So let's just make it explicit that if whatever doesn't work, you can just say, oh, he told me to do it. And it provides them a little bit of safety to try it. But again, you kind of have to feel your way through that conversation. You can kind of, once you've been doing this long enough, when somebody really wants to do something, but they're holding back for whatever reason. So I tend to use that get out of jail free card to say, you know what, let's just give it a shot. You can blame me if it doesn't work.
Okay, that's a very interesting idea. I haven't heard about that actually before. So, Christian, any question from you or any other questions?
Probably about the experiment. By us, we call this proof of concept. Exactly. We tend to spend way too much time in writing paper before to do anything, and then like double the time in paper than making a trial. So still, when we do proof of concept, I sense a lack of courage of team people and management people to just do some. Like last year, we didn't do any. I did push like crazy. Another colleague did push like crazy to do at least one or two. Our dream would be to have, like a money pot, and you have this money pot, and you can finance like, I don't know, 4 proof of concept per year. You just have to prioritize which one you do, and it's like, win or lose. It may come. So the thing is, I sense a lack of courage, and I was wondering, do you have this? Do you feel like this, or any trigger we can use to overcome this?
So is it the lack of perceived lack of courage that's the problem, or is the budget the problem?
It's not the budget. We had the budget to write paper, and we did write paper. We still have no working software.
Okay.
So the money is there. It's really the courage to say, stop writing, start acting.
Okay. So could be whatever's being written down, who's asking for it, and why are they asking for it, as opposed to a piece of working software. So is it part of a governance process that's being controlled somewhere, where I see that a lot in bigger companies, especially, banking here in Canada. They bought their innovation program or whatever from another company. So the company came and brought the manuals about how to do it, and they have all these templates to fill out. So the teams, they have to do that kind of stuff. So how did it come to be that we value the documents over software? and who is, I'm assuming there would be different sponsors for these proof of concepts, depending on what it is. Is there one of them that sort of strikes you as a mover, somebody who would be okay with not having those documents? Or is there a different way to create it? Or a different ritual to establish to say, every week, Mr. or Mrs. Stakeholder, we need you in the room and we're going to show you software. And then who is somebody that sort of has strong relationships and clout with the rest of the organization that can slowly shift away from the desire for those documents and more towards real action? It's sort of like I'm a bit of a car nut, and the way that the Ford Mustang came into play back in the 60s was it was a Skunk Works project. So when somebody at the top asked for it and carved off a bit of budget and made it a secret project to get that thing started. So who of those stakeholders that wants a proof of concept is more biased towards action?
Yeah, cool. Right answer. Makes me some click in the head, and I have a picture.
Somebody needs to do it first. It's sort of like there needs to be some precedent. Somebody has to act and do something first, and then people are going to go, oh my God, we don't need all these documents anymore. Why don't we just, instead of having 20 pages of documents, why don't we just have a one-pager of a canvas? What are we doing? Who are we doing it for? Why are we doing it? And what do we think is going to be better? And you kind of, you'll notice those windows of opportunity opening, but it has to come from an action. Somebody has to do something instead of just telling people that we should be building software instead of making documents.
Yeah.
And it will. Somebody will notice.
Yeah, I'm sure. Cool. Thanks for that.
I did find that other picture that I can share now.
Brilliant.
So this, I'm sure you've seen infographics before, but this was basically because we had too many people where we couldn't get them all in the room. They were all at different locations and stuff. We asked people to answer these questions. So I think introducing Agile for this project is a good idea. I think overall it's being taken seriously, and I feel supported to work this way. And we asked this question for, we sliced the data by business and IT and by level in the organization as well. So overall, the one that's up here was basically about half felt they completely agreed that we should work this way. 37% thought, well, yeah, I guess so. And then the other 6% didn't really care, but nobody disagreed. So now the interesting part is we all think it's a good idea, but we're not sure it's being taken seriously. So you could see that it dropped. The people who completely agreed with it, yes. But most of the people were, well, not sure, or I disagree, or somewhat disagree. And then feeling supported by management to work in an agile way, same results. So we kind of want to do this, but we don't think it's being taken seriously, and we don't really think there's a lot of support here. And then we split the answers by business and IT, executives, managers, and staff. So with this was data basically to go back to the sponsors and say, here's what people really think. So we did this in an anonymous way. Here's what people think. What are you going to do about it? So there's a bunch of more data for each of the questions. And then, whoops, there's the company name. We'll edit that out later. And just ask people, when you hear that word agile, what does it mean to you? So this is sort of a way to get people aligned around why we're doing this in the first place. Because I know I tend to see this a lot where you get people at the top that are asking us to change other people. So it's the drop the change through the hole in the floor. So they have a change up here and they just drop it into the organization and sort of, wash their hands of it and walk away. And it's not because they're not supporting it. It's more a time constraint. which is why they get change people or coaches to do the work. So by going through this process, it allowed us to have a different conversation. Short version of the story is, after 4 months, we fired the client, and they've been getting leadership coaching for the last year. We just said, you know what, given the discovery that we did, Agile's off the table. You just treat your people like crap. There's people going on sick leave. There's people up to 3 a.m. writing test cases because they still have to do all the old world stuff and this new Agile stuff. And, you know, you guys should be ashamed of how you treat your people. And I said it in a harsher way than that. I'm trying to be nice because I know this is recorded. But they had all the big consultancy firms come through there with their big PowerPoints and all this stuff and how great everything was and how great the future state was going to be. And we painted a picture of what it was really like to work in that company. And they felt terrible. They felt terrible that they let it get that bad. But it took that big enough of a shakeup to actually get them to start moving forward, as opposed to just being about Agile process and stuff. So we did probably 6 or 7 of these infographics from team to team. But without that kind of visual impact and giving people a real story, you know, this was probably 3 years ago? I think 3 years ago. I could still be there collecting money doing coaching. There was that much work to do, but we just decided, you know what, you guys really got to get your act together before you can even think about working in an Agile way.
Hey, that's a cool story. Really nice. Well, how was the feeling when you presented the result and say, we're going to go out of here, there's nothing we can do with you?
We had that conversation with, I think, the VPs first, and we walked out, got a call 30 minutes later saying, can you guys now be on a call with the SVP and the VP? And then we had that conversation, which was supposed to be 30 minutes, that ended up being 3 hours. And then that led to another conversation with the CIO. And we had the same conversation every time with each of them, just to give them the real story. And part of it is, I mean, it sounds harsh, but part of it is when you start the engagement is showing them, taking a stance, basically. And we said, we're not going to sugarcoat stuff for you. We're going to help you for this X period of time, and then we're going to give you the brutal truth as we see it. Because that's just our style. We don't like to come and try to tell you that everything's going to be perfect and okay. It just wouldn't be helpful for any of us. So we get permission I get permission to behave and tell them that brutal truth.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I find more often than not, they like it. They don't want to hear I've had clients that hung up on me before where they ask, you know, how can you ensure that we do this stuff after you've done the training? And I'm like, well, nothing. You guys have to do the work. If you're not going to do the work, we might as well not bother. And they go, oh, okay, we have to think more. We'll call you back later. Click. And they hang up and they don't call back. And I know they're not ready. So it's kind of pointless to go in there and collect money when no one's ready to do anything.
Yeah, I think that's really a really important point, to make a clear statement at the beginning. Mm-hmm. What you're thinking, the way you work, and which expectation can be or cannot be realized.
Mm-hmm. It's magnifying the good things too. I mean, that's a pretty negative story that I just told, but we told them about all the good things that we saw as well. So, you know what, we got teams that are just, they just want to do this, and here's the little stories and successes we've seen along the way. And then they go into a status meeting and get torn apart for making their project red, with 4 months to go, which is unheard of. You know, it's that they want to do the right thing. They're trying to do the right thing, and they're stuck in this system. But here's the evidence of all these successes. So it's kind of just painting a real picture of the good and the bad and the ugly at the same time, instead of what I see normally happens in the change world is we try to bury it and hide it and only show the good things and wordsmith the success stories in a certain way. And let's just strip the noise away and make it real for people.
Yeah, that's cool. It's nice to hear. It's all about data transparency. I'm trying also to do this, and sometimes, sometimes we tend to say we only show the data if it's green.
Yeah, yeah.
And it took me a huge amount of year to be proud to show the data when they're red, and to be proud to show it early as possible. I had last year the same again. It took me 2 months to the courage to say it's really dark red. So I've just missed the part to say it's red. I've jumped from orange to dark red, and that was a failure. I should have said as soon as I guess it's dark red, then give them the data. Say it's dark red. Send the emergency team immediately.
Yep. I like to train the executives to ask for red status reports. So it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. It should be, you know, if you get a colleague of mine worked in an insurance company, and he said whenever the executive would get 3 green status reports in a row, he'd immediately flag the project as red and call the team into his office. There's no way you can be green 3 cycles in a row. Something's going on. What are you either not telling me, or like there's something missing? Yeah. So it should be seen as a way to ask for help, not as a way to, you know, we don't know what we're doing because we're red.
That is cool. Yeah, that's a good trick.
I mean, that's a grenade in the organization. Whenever I go in at a higher level and I say, you know what, if you really want to make your company agile, start all of your projects red. And then just ask the program team, what are the 3 things you're doing this week to move towards green? And just get into a cycle of that, and agile will install itself, because it's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to deliver transparency so people who need real information to make decisions can make those decisions sooner. And they always love it up here, but they said, you know what, if we ask for that, yeah, that would destroy the entire organization. It's too far against our norms. but they always love the idea. Yeah.
And they could be a way to do a sort of say like, I'm always wondering why there's not so much intention or time to dedicate from top management for the critical project or the bigger project, and just go in the project room in the project team and say, okay, I know you're green, everything's fine. I just want to know inside the green, what are the 3 main challenges? And this is how to get you know, the top management to say, what is my preferred project and why don't I go inside the project team and ask for more, just to make attention and say, team, I care about you, I care about your project. If there's anything you can tell, I'll be friendly with you.
Yeah,
this would be a cool trust enabler.
Yes. So I think it's the surprises that they don't like. You know, nobody wants to be 2 weeks before release and have, whoops, can't make it. Right. That's where the problem really stems from, because now when that happens and it's, well, then we need to put more control on top of it to make sure that doesn't happen again, instead of, you know, and it's balanced. I mean, I think we want it to be more scientific than it really is, because when you start a project, you don't know anything. You have a budget, you have a pocket full of money, and an empty brain. How can you be green? You don't know anything yet.
Yeah.
But the rationale is, well, we haven't really started, so we're green, we're on track. But we're not. We don't have anything. We don't know what technology we're going to use. We don't have a plan. We don't, like, there's nothing. And but it's the social norms, right? That's the way things typically have worked in the past, and it's easier to do that than it is to try and do something different sometimes.
Yeah. What I was wondering is, based on all the people you saw and the company you saw, or the clients you took or don't took, what is your opinion on the people nowadays are keen on making experiment and trying to change? Is it getting more and more people that way, or is it still a majority of people reluctant to change in any case?
I think, well, generally speaking, people outside of North America tend to be more liberal and more accepting of change. I mean, when it really comes down to it, nobody wants something forced on them, no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just inside of North America, there's more of a cling to tried and true best practice process thinking, as opposed to elsewhere. They're more, people are more, seem to be more willing to want to try something different for whatever reason. I don't know what it is, but when people have more say or more control over what the change is, they're more likely to want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we enable those conversations versus, coming in with the solution?
Yeah,
I think. But, I've done workshops more or less everywhere. And the problems are generally the same, but outside of North America, there's more of a willingness to try something different.
mm-hmm. And do you see a tendency throughout the last 8 or 10 years? Like it's getting easier to speak about changes, or it's still difficult, or people are more doing with, or?
Ask that again. I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
If you make a rollback on your last 10 years,
mm-hmm.
Do you think now people are more willing to change than before? So is it easier for you to have people changing, or like another KPI would be the number of client when you have the first contact and you say, okay, I'm gonna make you a picture of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and they hang up saying, or they say, I'll call you later, and they never call back. Is this number decreasing, increasing, or still the same?
That's a good one. I would say there's a lot more pull than there used to be. So instead of having to sell agile related change, which, coming from an agile coaching background, that's what we would do. There's much more demand in people asking for it. And I think there's been enough information and experience out there that the companies I see, they have a better idea of what it is that they're asking for, as opposed to 10 years ago when they were asking, when they were transforming to agile, nobody knew what that was. Nobody knew the impact on the entire organization. And I think there's more information out there that people kind of know that, oh, it's not just an IT thing anymore. So they tend to be a little more receptive of not just looking at the team level, I think.
Okay, so it's like more awareness toward the whole level of organization. So it looks like on the average or on the masses, agile produce some good movement.
Yes. And do you think, you might have seen this too, but do you think it's a little more confusing in one sense because there is so much information out there? Because all the different camps have, well, you can't do agile, you have to be agile, it's a mindset, it's a new sort of whatever it is, there's these 10 new frameworks and stuff. So I imagine it's got to be a lot more confusing in one sense.
Yeah, my point of view on this, it's the effect of success. Like when agile was at the beginning, was just a manifesto and some amount of people doing it, and then it came mainstream with all the bias and all the different frameworks and the groups and the subgroups and the stuff. So with everything which is widely used, you have confusion and all the stuff. I just deal with this. I have sometimes an issue with agile people blaming themselves for not being perfect and not having a super branding for agile. I say, forget it, don't care. I mean, we speak about agile, that's the only thing we want. And it's up to us to make the side shining of agile more visible than the other. And if there's confusion, for me, it just reflects the fact. I mean, the world is confusing, the world is complex, and I cannot apply the Spotify model everywhere and it's going to work. It's just not going to work. So for me, it's just a fact, and it's dealing with this confusion, with this complexity, and that's why I like some of the things you've said before, like don't speak about agile, speak about risk reduction, speak about better dashboard. I don't know what, and you don't care. Just come in any way which they like, and start the niche, pick up success, and yeah, and maybe roll. And if they don't want to roll, then say, I've tried. You don't want, I go away. Maybe
Yeah.
if you want next year, call me back.
Yeah. It's got to make more sense to the people in the organization.
Yeah.
I find there was one place where I worked, we were using Scrum, pretty small. I think there was five or six teams in total, and the VP of engineering left, and his replacement was a lean guy. So he actually worked with John Shook, the guy who created the what was it? Either I think the A3 reports. But anyway, we stopped all Scrum language and started using all lean language. So instead of velocity, we talked about throughput, which, yeah, they're different things, but we switched the language so he could understand it. So here's what we're trying to do to optimize our lead time. And within the teams, here's what we're trying to do to optimize our cycle time. And here's what we know now. But just, it should make more sense to them. And I think as the change people, we often get too stuck on our way being the right way to do it. And we want to impose our way. Yeah. I've seen instances where, the coaches want to just be the smartest people in the room. Look at how many models I know. Yeah. And they tend to over model people to death when, you can simplify it, right? But yeah, it's hard. It's kind of like, I like to say doing this type of work is trying to solve a Rubik's Cube that's made out of LEDs. So the colors are changing while you're solving it.
That's a cool one.
Yeah.
Oh, I can remember this one. It's exactly this. I mean, you start and you think it's this, and you discover and it's something else, and then you discover again it's another one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like the English guy which wrote Network Organization told me it took me 20 years to learn to shut up and ask questions.
Yeah.
So I want you young people to learn this quicker. Just stop talking and ask questions.
Yeah.
And don't roll over with a tool. Just try to discover what's going on.
Yeah.
That's pretty hard job.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, I think we're approaching the end of the time box.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, Christian, any last question?
Ooh. Yes, I always have the funny question. And the question is, which question should we have had asked?
That's the one. I don't know.
Oh,
I've done. It's hard to say because the world of change is such a big, meaty topic.
Or I could also reframe saying, based on the feeling of the hour, what would you like to add or to say?
I would say find your groove as a change person. Right? Some people are more disruptive by nature. Some people are more kind of administrative, like following the process. But be yourself. Bring your whole self as a change agent. And most importantly, we're there to help. We're being asked to help a problem that is not well understood. Mm-hmm. We're not being asked to install a process or use a method or use a framework. We're being asked for help for something. And we've got to figure out how to go about that the right way.
Oh, that's a cool one. I'm going to
That sounds like a perfect ending.
Yeah. Maybe you want to add something, Thomas?
No, I think that's a perfect ending. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Jason, very much for spending 1 hour on this Management 3.0 seminar. And
No problem.
see you some next time. Bye.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason.
Okay. Bye.
Have fun. Take care.
Okay. You too.